Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher, and appreciate you guys checking out today's video and spending some of your time with me. We're going to be talking about bank fishing for bass today. I get a lot of comments about people saying that all I do is talk about fishing out of a boat, and people say, well, I don't have a boat, I fish off the bank. So I have got a lot of experience bank fishing. That's what I used to do all the time. So I'm just sort of going to go over in today's episode some things that have worked for me, the scenarios that's worked for me, different type of lures. So we're going to get into that in today's episode, and I think it's going to really improve your bank fishing if you're one of the anglers that do that. Also, guys, before we get started, a quick reminder about you guys are probably tired of hearing about Black Friday sales, but there's two really good ones going on right now. If you guys want to get some good deals on fishing tackle, Tackle Warehouse has got their big Black Friday sale going on for the rest of this month. 50, not 50, but up to 25% off on a bunch of stuff across the website. So I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description. If you guys would like to use that link, it's a good way to support the Fishing Teacher. And also, guys, Solar Bat has got 50% off on my Signature Series sunglasses, RB2s and RB3s. So I'll have my Solar Bat link in the description of the video if you guys would like to take advantage and get you some half price right now on my sunglasses. And finally, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me right now, we're doing a lot of jerkbait lessons here on Table Rock Lake and Stockton Lake. Shoot me a private message on my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, and I'll get you set up with the details on that. So appreciate putting up with plugs there. Okay, guys, that's how I started bass fishing. I didn't have a boat until I was a junior in high school. You guys may have heard the story. I bought a little 16-foot leaking flat bottom at a rummage sale, by Joplin, Missouri there for $200. And I fixed it up. I got me a little 9-horse motor on it that was like 15 years old. And that was my first boat. But prior to that, I did a lot of bank fishing and wading and all that type of stuff. And then I even did later on, even after I had a boat, I still did some bank fishing occasionally. So we're going to sort of talk a little bit about some tips and advice on fishing off of a bank. Okay, now there's two different scenarios for bank fishing. One is what I call a pond scenario for fishing a pond, and the other is actually bank fishing off a regular larger lake. Each one of those is a little bit different as far as how you approach that. Creeks to some extent, most of the time, if I'm fishing a creek, guys, I'm wading a creek. So it's sort of a different subject all along. But if I'm fishing a pond most of the time, or a lake, I'm walking along the bank with it. So let me briefly touch on ponds a little bit, and then we'll get into the lakes in here. Ponds are a lot different than lakes are, simply because most ponds, you can walk around the whole pond. And a lot of the ponds, most of them are shallow. So, there's a lot of different options to where you can catch fish out on a pond. In a pond, you're apt to catch a fish anywhere. Literally, you can walk around the whole pond and catch fish the whole distance of the pond. So it's not quite as, you don't have to be as discretionary about the areas that you set up at. You're just walking. But one thing that I will give you some tips and advice on pond fishing is make your cast parallel down the bank. Now that's important in other type of, bank fishing too, but especially for pond fishing. Most bass that live in ponds, unless those ponds are really shallow and they've got some cover out in the middle of the pond, most pond bass relate to very shallow water. So by far, my number one technique for pond fishing when I'm off the bank is paralleling the bank with a spinnerbait. Just take some type of a little 3/4 ounce or half-ounce spinnerbait. Just walk the bank, make parallel casts anywhere between 2 to 5 foot off the bank. Really, really good way to catch them. If the water's a little bit, shallower out a little bit, like a Texas rig worm's a good way to catch them. If the water is over 70 degrees, you can catch them really good on a buzzbait. That's a really good way to catch them in a pond. But a spinnerbait and a Texas rig worm and a buzzbait are three of my primary weapons with pond fishing. But pond fishing is simple compared to what we're going to get into with the lake fishing. Let's talk about the lake fishing here, the lake bank fishing. Now, this is going to be on a situation where you can't walk the whole lake, obviously. You're going to have to pick a part of the lake in order to, get yourself around most of the fish. Now, like anything else, when you're bank fishing, it's just like fishing out of a boat. You got to put yourself around the fish are based upon the season of the year. So based upon the season of the year is going to dictate what part of the lake that you want to fish at, the area-wise, specifically to the lake. So I want to sort of break this up a little bit into seasonality, times of the year a little bit. First of all, wintertime, not a good time to fish off the bank in the wintertime in the lake. If you got water temperatures in the 40s or even the low 50s or something like that in the wintertime, those fish are just not positioned very well where you can catch them off the bank. Even if you throw out in deeper water, pretty tough to catch them. If you do want to fish in the wintertime and you're just dead set on it, just try to get out on the end of some of the deeper points on the lake. That's where those fish are going to be out in the wintertime. So try to find some access areas to where you can get out on some type of a deep point and just cast out there straight off the point, with an A-rig, a little swim bait, a jerk bait, something like that. But moreover, the most bank fishing you're going to do is going to be in the spring, summer, or fall time of the year when the water temperatures are mid-50s or higher. So before we get into that, the first thing I want to say about bank fishing is if you can bank fish at night, your success rate is going to go through the roof compared to daytime bank fishing. Nighttime bank fishing sometimes can be more productive than boat fishing because, of the angle of the bank and how you can cover that water. So if you're fishing anytime the water's over 50 degrees at nighttime, this is a really good time, to throw a black spinnerbait's really good, or a Texas rig worm. Those are the two primary things that I fish at night. Maybe again, like a black buzzbait a little bit, but you can't beat a spinnerbait and a Texas rig worm, or maybe even a jig, something like that. So when you're fishing at night, one of the things that you want to do is you want to get on a part of the lake that has some type of a close deep water access. Therefore, night fishing on a lake, one of the best places you can do is fish a riprap bank. Get out on those riprap banks and just walk that riprap, and you got to be careful because it's rocky. But guys, you can have some great success at night bank fishing off a riprap. I mean, really good success. Those bigger fish, they get right shallow on those rocks at night, and you can parallel those banks with that spinnerbait or that Texas rig and catch a bunch of fish on a riprap bank. They're good in the daytime too, but they're really, really good at nighttime. Other type of places that work really good at nighttime are just like the wintertime points. Points are going to be a key structure for bank fishing simply because they're sort of migration routes for fish, and there's a lot of different depth options to fish off the bank. You can fish the sides of the points or you can fish the ends of the points, and based upon the slope of the point, you can be in a variety of different water depths. So points are really good places to fish at night too. But again, my favorite is like a little 3/8 ounce black spinnerbait with like a number 5 gold Colorado blade on it. I've caught a ton of fish at night doing that, or some type of like dark colored June bug or, black plastic worm, something like that, or a black buzzbait can be really good. Those are 3 very bank friendly type of deals to do. Okay, now the next time is like once that water starts getting into the 60s, especially in the springtime of the year when those fish start spawning, this is a really good time to bank fish. And once that water temperature starts getting into the 60s, usually April and May, when I'm bank fishing in April and May, I'm going to the back of the coves. So I try to locate some places I can access to where I can walk the back of those coves. Any type of a flat cove where you think those fish may be spawning at, get in, start about 2/3 of the way back in the cove. And again, it depends on if you're able to access those areas with private property or whatever. But the only thing you need, there's 2 baits that you need for the springtime of the year when those fish are close to spawning. Number 1 is a wacky rig. Wacky rig is probably going to be your number 1 most productive bait. Just fan cast it everywhere out in the back of those coves. Again, try to target sort of 2 to 10 foot off the bank. Fish slow and methodical with that wacky rig. Really, really good way to catch them. And the other way that I like to catch them that time of year is some type of a small swim bait. It can be something like that 5-inch mag draft, or some type of a 4-inch Kitech, something like that. Reeling that little swim bait just about 2 or 3 inches underneath the water back in those areas. Now that's a really good way to catch like some cruising fish that aren't necessarily bedding or focused on spawning. But swim bait, wacky rigs is basically the thing that you want to have there. Now, as it warms up and you start to get into like the post-spawn in the summer months, again, I would highly suggest trying to get out there at night. I mean, nighttime fishing during that time of year is going to be really, really good. If you can't fish at night, fish in the low light conditions. Get out there early in the morning, late in the evening, and those are going to be places that those fish move up closer to the bank that make them more catchable for you. It's going to be pretty tough for you to catch some fish in the heat of the summer off the bank, almost anywhere that you go in a man-made lake. So try to get out there early. And one of my favorite baits to throw in the summertime, if you get out there early in the morning or in the evening, is a little popper, like that Megabass Pop X or Rebel Pop R. Little popper is deadly early in the morning in the summertime if you're fishing the bank. Probably my number one, favorite bait to fish. In general, topwaters are what I fish off the bank that time of year because I'm not fishing during the day very much. Now, if you do want to fish during the day, sometimes try to get out there on those banks that have some type of cover on it where you can throw a plastic worm around it. Maybe try to get some areas where you can cast around some boat docks. That's one way that I used to catch them a lot in the summertime when I was walking the banks down at Grand Lake, because my mom and dad, they had a trailer house in this one cove at Grand Lake, and in the cove there where the trailer house was, we had a friend that had the boat dock there, and I would walk the whole cove, myself during the daytime, and I caught a lot of fish throwing a plastic worm around boat docks off the bank. So if you can do that without being on private property, walk the banks in the summertime and try to throw that plastic worm around the boat docks. It's a really good way to catch them. Okay, now in the fall time of the year, when that water temperature starts cooling down a little bit, this can be another good way to catch them off bluffs. And one of my favorite ways to catch them off bluffs in that time of year, in the fall time of the year, is I try to find some type of a steep, bluffy type bank that I can walk on. Now, obviously, you can't walk on a vertical wall of a bluff, but there are some bluffs out there. You might not even really call them bluffs. They may be like steep banks, but those really, really steep banks that you can walk on that have water deep right off next to them, if you can get out there in the fall time of the year when there's some wind hitting those areas, this can be another really good way to catch them. And also, I try to find areas in the fall time of the year that are up like in the dirtier water part of the lake, like in the back of the creeks or the upper river extremities. Get on those steep banks that have some wind on it and throw like a square bill crankbait. Just parallel the banks and throw down the edges of them parallel with a little square bill crankbait, especially if you have water visibility of, under 2 foot. So that's the number one thing that you can look for in the fall, is try to find the dirtiest water that you can find and throw a small crankbait parallel to those rocky, steep banks in the fall time of the year. If you're in a lake that doesn't have that kind of clarity, like say, for example, it's a little bit more stained, one of my favorite ways to catch them off the bank is on a whopper plopper. Whopper plopper is really good from about late September into early November. And same type of deal, just paralleling those banks, targeting that 2 to 5 foot of water in those same type of steeper bank areas with it. But every lake is unique too. When you're talking about bank fishing off of a lake, a lot of it has to do with how accessible the areas are and how flat or how steep the banks are. Every lake is completely different. So you're going to have your own unique challenges to every lake that you fish. For example, you can't fish a lake that if you got grass growing all around it and the grass grows way out into the middle of the lake and it's all soupy, you're not going to be able to fish that. You sort of got to fish, the places that you can fish. But overall, here's a good piece of advice. If you want to put yourself around the most fish and the easiest fish to catch off the bank, the number one place that you're ever going to fish is a riprap bank. Bass live on riprap all year long, and they usually live shallow on a riprap, and you can fish the bank very easily. You can fish a riprap bank very easily from the bank. There's not like a big disadvantage to it. In fact, that if I can walk a riprap bank, I think I can fish it more effectively than I can with a boat. So try to stay on the riprap. Watch out for snakes, guys, because those snakes love riprap banks. So you're going to have to be careful. Wear you some boots. Be careful, when you're walking that stuff, because you don't fall down. But just take your time, pick your way through the rocks, and based upon the season, they could be anything from a spinnerbait to a topwater to a crankbait to a worm or whatever. It's just seasonality. But riprap's a good way to catch them, as is point. So Anyway, guys, that's my advice with it. If you just want to get bit and catch a lot of fish, try to get out there at night, get on steep banks, riprap banks, steep rocky banks, put you on a spinner bait and you'll catch some fish off the bank. So hope it helps out. We'll talk later.